This is the Clark Connection Podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and power. We'll dive deep into the stories and strategies that ignite personal growth and entrepreneurial fire. Join us as we empower you to take control, level up your leadership, and build the life you deserve. Get ready to rise, to thrive, and to finally become the leader of your own destiny. Let's go.
Welcome to the Clark Connection Podcast. It's great to be with you here. I'm your host, Aaron Clark, aka The Coach. And look, we have an excellent episode planned for you guys today. On here, we will have special guest, Dr. Andrew Williams, who's an associate dean at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. And look, we're going to talk about all sorts of leadership discussions, and we're really going to dive into that topic. But before we get there, gotta give a quick shout out to my sponsors. Bobbie with the Comfy Quest LLC, Andrew with Automate Integrate Professional Services, Wayne with 7K Metals, Chris and Jess with CNJ Embroidery, and Joseph with Landscape King. And look, all of their contact information, it's listed below. Make sure you hit them up. Tell them Coach Clark sent you. And they are doing specials if you throw in Coach Clark sent you to them. Also, if you're looking to get in touch with me, right here, all my social, at Coach_A_Clark. You can go to my website, CoachAClark.com. Make sure you are also liked, followed, subscribed to the podcast to make sure that we continue to bring you great content each and every single episode. And also follow us on Facebook, Instagram. We've got the Clark Connection Podcast. Go follow us there. But what you really guys are really wanting to hear about is our special guest, Dr. Andrew Ted Williams, one of my friends. I was fortunate enough to sit under him as my pastor for several years. But Andrew, he's been in ministry for over 20 years. And currently he's serving in 3 different capacities at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary as the Associate Dean of the Church Ministries Development, the Director of Mentoring Programs, and then he was also the Associate Vice President of Auxiliary Services and Operations. He served as a senior pastor and a lead pastor for over 10 years. Earned his doctorate of philosophy in 2017. Has been married for 14 years to his wonderful wife, and they have 3 great kids. So let's go ahead and let's bring on Dr. Williams. And welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hey, man. Hey, do your viewers know that you're a liar? You just went through this great introduction about me, and it was very kind of you, and I'm really glad to be here tonight.
Yes. So I appreciate you hopping on. Appreciate all that. And so tell us a little bit more about that current role with the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on again. So what I currently do at NOBTS is that I serve as a professor and I teach a lot of different subjects, but an administrative job that I'm currently doing is I'm the Associate Dean of the Church Ministries Division, which, as you can imagine, at a Baptist seminary is a role that encompasses a good bit of my time. Within our division, we house everything from those who are training to be preachers and pastoral ministry to missionaries to evangelism and church music and Christian leadership, including also discipleship and spiritual formation. There are a lot of different areas within our division. And so my job as the associate dean of this division is to work with the faculty, which is about half of the faculty of the school. And so that's what I do on a day-to-day basis is I teach class and I work with our faculty, in addition to a couple other things.
And you said that's about half the faculty. How many people is that?
So there's 27 professors in my division. So these are individuals who have terminal degrees. They have PhDs. They have doctorate of educations. They have doctorate of ministries. They are the ones who have gone the distance in educational pursuit of excellence. And so, as you can imagine, sometimes leading a group like that, you have a group of individuals who really are the leaders of their field And I've been tasked with really trying to lead the leaders, which can be a challenge at times, but it really is a lot of fun. I have some great coworkers.
Yeah, I was about to say, and they all get along all the time, right?
Absolutely. No, by and large, they get along really great, but they all have very strong ideas about the way things should be. And so a lot of what I end up doing is building consensus and get us all going in the same direction.
Yeah, and so so moving into that role of leading the leaders, that's a huge thing in itself.
Yeah.
How do you go, like, how do you prepare, like, how do you even get ready to do something like that? That's just a huge task when you think about it.
You know, some of it I think is just learned through the years. When I look back on growing up as a kid, I had parents who really encouraged me to not be a follower, but to be the one who led in situations. So, when you're in grade school, when you're in high school, you have a lot of peer pressure put around you. But my parents always just encouraged me, you be the person of integrity when nobody else is watching. And that really paid off well for me. I think about it now. I think I was 17 years old, and I was asked to supervise a construction crew of 4 men, all of whom were my seniors by a number of years. But the biggest thing was I showed up for time. I showed up for work ahead of time. I showed up prepared. In the years leading up to that, you're like, okay, 17, how many years did you have leading up to that? It was about 5 years leading up to that where I was working on the job site, and I was always paying attention and trying to learn how to improve. And that was something I learned early on is you don't have to have all the answers, but be curious and be ready to learn at every opportunity that you have. And then as I went into college, I just really started, again, the Lord put me into different positions of leadership. Some of them were on the academic side, some of them were on volunteer side, but I was going to try my best and I was willing to fail. And that's one of those lessons I learned early on is that if you're going to lead, it's going to mean that at times you're going to fail. It's because you're trying something. But I came to the point where I was okay with that. And then continuing on through there and going through my master's degree, I had opportunity to do that. I was serving in ministry in a lot of different ways, which brought me into my first pastorate. And I'll never forget, it was one of the first business meetings that I had, and there was an older man in the church. He was retired. He was a retired school teacher who had been a school board superintendent. He just happened to be the chairman of the deacons. His name is Kim Childs, and I love the man dearly. And I'm sharing this conversation publicly, even though it happened privately. I've never told him this, so if he ever watches this, he'll know just how appreciative I am. But we had a business meeting, and I'll just say this. I was young, and I didn't know how to lead a church, really. And so the business meeting went on. There wasn't anything that was just terrible from it. But on Monday morning, Mr. Kim walks into my office, and he says, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And, at that moment, I think back to that, and I could have either kind of bristled and been like, what you talking about? I'm the guy who has the master's degree in divinity. I'm the guy who's working on my PhD. I mean, yeah, you were a school board, but, I had enough wisdom instilled in me to listen when somebody like that talks. And he proceeded to talk to me about what it looks like to lead. And it looks like building consensus and listening to all sides before you walk into a meeting like that so that everybody's on the same page and people aren't feeling blindsided. And that paved the way for me in ministry and now in the role that I'm in now. I served as a pastor for a little over 10 years. A good portion of that time, I got to be your pastor. And so, leading knuckleheads like you. But I just learned a lot about taking the time to get to know the people that you're trying to lead. Because if you're leading just from a position of up here and I'm the authority and I'm the one you've got to listen to, you're actually not leading. You're walking by yourself. You can be going a direction, but if people aren't following you, you're actually not leading. And so when the time came and the Lord made it kind of clear to us that, all right, it was time to transition out of pastoral ministry, and some doors opened up just kind of out of the blue. It wasn't anything that I was necessarily looking for, even aware of. It just was a phone call. and I was asked to come and to teach. The first role that I have here, I was the Associate Vice President of Operations and Auxiliary Services, which means on a campus like NOBTS, I do stuff. And what that meant was I oversaw about 140 employees. I oversaw 6 different areas, from the operations of facilities to guest housing and student housing and dining services, and the cafe on campus and the post office. And I mean, really, if it was something that you could see, do, or stay at on campus, I had to be responsible for it. And when I came in, there were parts of the organization that had the right people, but it was just poorly organized. But I understood, this is a culture that has to change. But in order to change it, I had to get those key leaders who were leaders in those parts of the organization to come on side of me. And so it took time to build the trust, and to help them to see, here's the vision. We can do this with excellence. And if we do it with excellence, we'll be more efficient. And if we're more efficient, we'll be able to do more for our employees, because the number one resource that you have as a leader is your people. And so if you don't take care of your people, you're not going to be able to lead long term. And over the course of about 9 months, we took an organization that was trending to be several $1 million over budget, and we brought them in line. We were able to reduce the budget significantly just with us being intentional about everything that we did. We asked ourselves the question, is this accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish within this part of the organization? Obviously, a school like New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary has been here since 1917. And there's a lot about what we do as an organization. But at the end of the day, what we were doing within the organizations I was leading had to support what we were trying to do as an organization as a whole. And so helping all of our crews and all of my supervisors get behind that vision really helped us propel, so that we were able to move the needle in what I thought was going to take about 3 years. We did it in about 9 months. And as we did that, there were some staff changes here at the seminary. There was a faculty member who took a church pastorate in North Mississippi, and so he was moving. He teaches in the same field that I teach in, and so they needed someone to teach more classes. And, they came and they asked me, would you consider teaching more classes? And because you're going to be teaching more, you can't stay in that administrative role, but you've got it in shape so that it actually is going to be a lot easier for somebody else to take on. But we've got another administrative role that we want you to do. In 2019, 2020, they took 3 different divisions and they combined them into one. In the past, you had the Pastoral Ministries Division. You had the Christian Education Division, also known as the Discipleship and Christian Leadership Division. And you had the Music Division, and they were all their own separate divisions with 3 separate deans. And they said, we want to combine these all into one division. Well, there have been 2 other associate deans before me, and they're great guys. Both of them are my friends, and they did a good job moving the needle. But it was time that they were ready to kind of step out of that, and they wanted somebody else to look into that. And so that's where they said, we've got a task for you. What's that? Yeah. Well, that's one way to put it. And it's funny because my colleagues will even know, they'll be like, we understand that we're not the easiest people to work with. I'm like, no, you're not. But thanks for acknowledging that. And so that's how I got into my current role. And so a lot of what I do is I help work with our faculty to make sure that they have the resources they need to educate the next generation of pastors and missionaries and evangelists and, those who are going to serve in positions of leadership. And just kind of a little plug right here is, if you're watching this and you have interest in doing another degree, and obviously you've heard me talk that I'm coming from a Christian perspective. At New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, we have several degrees that could help further equip you in the field of Christian leadership. We've got master's degrees focused on that. We have doctorate education that are focused on educational leadership and Christian leadership. We have a PhD in Christian leadership, and it's one of the fastest growing degrees that we have. And I just want to encourage you, if you're even at all interested, go to nobts.edu and just search our website, and you can see the degrees that we have. They really are doing a great job of equipping those who are interested in leading.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, you gave a lot of great things right there. One that I want to go touch on is you talked about being willing to fail.
Yeah.
And, that talking about learning as a leader, you don't have to know all the answers to lead. And I think that's one that a lot of people really, really fall short on right there, especially at first, as we think, because it's got me with, I'm assuming that's how it was with, you were talking about the business meeting with Ken when he was like, hey, Champ, come here. Let me explain something to you. So how has that learning to be okay with failure helped shape you as a leader?
Yeah. I heard somebody say one time, when you walk into a meeting, you don't have to have the best idea in the room. You just need to leave the room with the best idea. And I think part of that being willing to fail is that mentality of understanding, like, I am limited. There's only so much I can know in my lifetime. There's only so much I can experience in my lifetime. And I'm willing to go out and to try something based on what I know and what my experience is. But it may not be the best. And it may fall flat on its face. But you know what? At least I can say, all right, we tried that and it didn't work. So who else has ideas? And if you do that enough times, it will put you in a position that before you jump sometimes, you'll really start to look around you and say, who are those people who God has given those opportunities and experiences of leadership that you can lean on? Because if you can learn from somebody else's failure, I promise that feels a whole lot better than your own. But part of leading is at times you are going to fail. And it's going to be painful, but it's necessary, and it's even a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think even you said it, you've got to be open that you don't always have the best ideas.
Right.
I mean, I know I always do, but no.
All right. Sure you do there. Sure you do. In that case, we probably just need to hang up and you can finish this one, right?
Exactly. But like one I was listening, I don't remember which podcast it was on, but somebody was talking about, being humble and it's not necessarily that a humble person is like just very soft spoken and quiet and some of the greatest leaders ever were humble people.
Yeah.
But they also had to take charge but also realize, Andrew might have the answer to this. That's a better one. Like you said, that's the best idea. Everybody, cool. Let's go with that.
That's right. Yeah. No, and that's a good point. You've got to have that humility. And there are several ways that will come about over time. But yeah, one of the key things that has driven me for years is that reality that I am a created being. I know that sounds basic, and that this is where my Christian roots are definitely coming out. But I am a creature who has been created by someone higher than me. And so there are things that I can't comprehend because they're beyond me. There are things that I can't do because they're beyond me. But part of being created, the other part of that is, I look at you and your viewers and those who I see every day in class, but even those I see at the stop sign zone that overpasses here in New Orleans. You know what else is true about them? They're also created beings. And because of that, they're created in the image of God, and they are deserving of dignity and respect. And I think as a leader, one thing that has really guided me is that it doesn't matter in what position that you're in or with how many employees you have or who you're working with. In my previous role when I was over operations, I had a number of men that worked for me who had been through rehab on several occasions. And I treated them with the same amount of dignity and respect as I do with the president of this school who has 2 PhDs. Because at the end of the day, they're both those created in the image of God. And I'm going to treat them with kindness, with respect. And because they're created in the image of God, they may have really great ideas that I haven't thought of. So I need to listen. Yeah,
absolutely. And guys, if you're enjoying this so far, that to help continue to bring about great content, look, make sure you hit that subscribe button right below. so we continue to reach more people, to help more people, and show how important it is to treat all created beings the same way.
Yeah.
And so,
Hey, can I pause right here on that one?
yes.
I'm going to do something what I do in my online classes. Like, seriously, pause
Yeah.
this video and subscribe, like, do the things he's asking you to, because you're going to get some more great content. Not just what you see today, but over the next several months or years. You won't be sorry for that.
No, you won't. And I appreciate you jumping in and saying that for me.
Yeah.
And so one that I want to ask too is that because I think it's so cool, your leadership roles, and you can kind of see just kind of how you talked about. I started off as that, I'm going to call it the young punk leader.
Yeah.
To now, hey, I'm in charge of leaders. What are like things that you've learned as far as going from being that senior and lead pastor to now in the role of dean over people?
Yeah. There are so many lessons to be learned. I think one of the big ones is just like you've already impressed, just having that humility and being willing to stop and listen to people. I just can't emphasize that enough. I think that's something that as a pastor, I really, in pastoral ministry, there's a quote that has been said by a guy named Sinclair Ferguson. And he made the statement that if you're going to feed the sheep, you've got to smell like them. And, in pastoral ministry and pastoral leadership, sometimes guys want to lead from a pedestal, but they actually don't take the time to get to know their people and to see what their thoughts are and what their concerns are. And you know what? You still may lead in the same exact direction, but sometimes just taking that time and getting to hear people out and to listen to them and say, I hear what you're saying, and you're probably not going to like it because we're still going to do this. But I want you to know I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure it doesn't go to the level that you're concerned about. This is going to sound like a really cheesy or basic example of that, but you'll remember when we did the renovation at the church,
Yes.
We moved a church that was established in 1875 from having pews, wait for it, to having chairs. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're in a traditional Baptist church, boy, get prepared. And so I spent a lot of time talking to those that I knew were going to have some objections and have some concerns. And, one of the big concerns was they didn't want to lose the reverency that they had grown up with in church. They didn't want this to be like a movie theater or people just casually taking this idea of worship and making it more of an entertainment model. And so as I heard them, I brought one of the sample chairs to the house. I said, why don't you sit in this? And you just tell me, is this comfortable? And they said, yeah, it's really comfortable. And I said, well, listen, there are several reasons. There are financial reasons. There's comfort reasons to make sure that we're, even trying to take care of our senior adults. But I want you to hear me say this. We're still going to be moving forward to these chairs, but I will try everything I can to make sure that we maintain that spirit of reverency, because I think that's something that we need to make sure that we do in a house of worship. And so that's just somewhat an example. And even today, as the dean position that I'm in, there are sometimes changes that we have to institute as a school. And as you've already mentioned, when you're leading faculty, people who have terminal degrees, they're very opinionated about how things should be done, especially when they've been around for a while. And so sometimes I have to go into offices with my colleagues and have conversations to hear them out and what their concerns are. And, look them in the eye and say, listen, I love you and I care for you. This is the decision that we're going to be moving forward with. But hear me say, your voice matters. And while this doesn't, I'm going to make sure that XXX are done because I know that matters to you. And so just trying to find that way to hear people out, even if it doesn't go the direction that they want it to go, that's important.
Yeah, and that was a good thing because as you were talking about, it's important to make sure you hear them. But one that you didn't say that implied was ultimately the buck stops with me.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to hear you. I want to get your opinion. But it's my job to ultimately look and say, how is this going to affect everybody on the team and what's going to be best for the team?
No, that's a really great point because, In leadership, if you're doing it well, you're equipping the next generation of leader. So what that means is when you put those leaders that you're equipping into positions where they succeed, do you know who gets the accolades and the praise for that success? It's not you as a leader. It's them.
I was going to say me.
And yeah. And when you go out there and you put them out and it fails, do you know who's going to get the criticism? It's not them. It's you as the leader. But that's the role of what leadership is. You should always be working yourself out of a job. I'm
Yes.
going to, when I was growing up, my high school baseball coach just so happened to be the guy who just retired as the Brigadier General of the Louisiana National Guard. And that was something he impressed on me early on, like even on the baseball field, is listen, these guys who are younger than you be training them to take your place because one day you're going to graduate, you might get injured, you're not going to play high school baseball forever. Nobody does. If you do, there's something really weird with you. But the same thing applies into leadership. If you're not training the people underneath you with that mentality, no, the buck does have to stop with me. But if you're not training them, then there's never any opportunity for you to grow because you've built a position that's dependent on you.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds, so one of the books that I'd read recently was Hire Like You Beat Cancer. I don't know if you read that one.
I haven't read that one, no.
But I'll say it's by Jim Roddy. And that's one of the things he talks about is that, he had his own business, was growing the business, and found out that at the age of 32, he was in stage 3 cancer. And so could not work and run his business at all. And he said that was the most miserable year besides fighting cancer, having to depend is my business going to succeed because of the people around me? And so that was one that he started looking for was when I hire people, who can take my spot? Could this person eventually take my spot?
Yeah.
And
back to that point of failure, Aaron, is, when you're equipping those underneath you to grow as leaders, what that means is you have to give them opportunity to lead. And when you give them opportunity to lead, what do you think is going to happen?
They're going to be successful every time.
Every single time.
Yes.
That's exactly what happens. No, you got to be prepared for them to fail. And it can be messy at times, and it can be heartbreaking at times, but it's still worth it because if you're training them well, there will be those who grow into leadership. Yeah.
Well, and one that's cool because you mentioned that, so it made me think I've got a young lady that I'm working with, and pretty much she leads the admissions team now. Or at our Baton Rouge location. I still oversee all 6 locations, but when she was first getting started, one of the things that I would do is I would go, all right, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, et cetera, yada, yada. And what do you think we should do? And she would tell me, all right, well, that's what we're going to do. And so, at first she would panic. I'm like, what's the matter? If it fails, everybody's going to be mad at me. Nobody's going to know it's you. Hey, but if it works, I'm going to tell her, oh, that wasn't my idea. That was
that's
her.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's what you got to do. And that's where that humility comes in. I see there is one of the problems of modern leadership is that we have people who want to be leaders. They want the platform, but they don't have the character to match the platform. And what ends up happening is they get into those positions in which they want to be the star of the show and they can't handle everything else as a threat to them. And so, no, that's a great word is, passing those accolades. That wasn't that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it works. And I actually stole that from Sid Edwards, who's now the mayor president of Baton Rouge, but that's what he would do whenever he would pull some of us young guys in and like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do y'all think? No, or how would y'all implement? And he'd go, cool, that's what I'm going to do. And I'd asked him that one day. I said, why are you doing that? And he goes, Aaron, if I fail, nobody's going to crucify me and not follow me because I hadn't done it. But you, on the other hand, they might crucify you and let's run this kid out of town.
That's right.
It builds their confidence up.
Yeah.
And knowing, hey, I did make the right decision. Or, I did not make the right decision. And it's quite funny how often as a young leader, when you have somebody doing that for you, you're surprised how often you are right with doing that and trusting that gut instinct.
Yeah.
As we move and grow.
Yeah, that's right.
And so as we're kind of getting close to time, one thing, and I'll say that I believe, is that all leaders are readers, but not all readers are leaders. And
Yeah.
obviously, like, you do a little bit of reading. I can see behind you.
Yeah, I try to.
But what's one book that you would recommend for all leaders to go read?
Okay. Well, one of the obvious books I'm going to say is, listen, if you're a believer, if you're not a believer, read the Bible. That's one of those obvious books. Yes, I know that. But from just
I would say the Sunday school answer, yes.
Yeah, it's a Sunday school answer. From an industry standpoint, there are two books I really would recommend. One of which is this book is called From Good to Great by Jim Collins. One of the things that Collins talks about in this book is really about how to build an organization that is flexible, that that you can pivot on. Because when we think about leader, the bigger the organization is, the harder it is to turn that organization. And so one of the ways that you have to do that is you've got to have the right people there who can help you execute that vision, who are willing to acknowledge things for what they really are. Part of leading is that you can truthfully and willingly acknowledge, like, hey, this is the actual situation and it ain't good. This is the ideal situation that we're trying to move to. Very rarely are you able to move directly from right here to right here. But what you've got to do is you've got to say, this is where we are, this is where we want to go. So this is the first step. This is the second step. And you incrementally move that direction. And Collins's book does a good job of setting up some safeguards and some rails of how to do that, how to get the right people on the bus, realizing that you may not, that's the analogy he used, get the right people on the bus first, and then you can figure out what seat they're supposed to sit on. And so that's a good one. Another one that I'm going to recommend is this book, Measure What Matters.
I'll say, and can I stop you real quick right there? Because I think that's important what you said too, or that we have to actually say, hey, this is where we are. You have to acknowledge this is where it is. Instead of just, all right, we're going to get over here. Because if you don't know where you are, it's like saying, hey, let's go to Disney World.
Yeah.
Where am I at? How do I get there?
Yeah. So, the great philosopher Yogi Berra once said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably never get there. And that little quip, that says a whole lot about life.
Yes. And so, sorry to interrupt on that one, because I was let me get there, because that's an important one that people need to realize.
Yeah, you've got to be truthful. And sometimes that can be painful, especially, if you're leading in an organization that is a family organization, like what you're in. Aaron, I'm sure that in the role that you're in, you've had some who've gone before you, who you've known your entire life. And, there are decisions that you're coming in behind, and maybe they weren't the best decisions, but to faithfully move the organization, you've got to say, you know what, that might have been the right decision at the time, but it didn't lead to where we need to be. And that can be a painful conversation to have, but it's necessary. Sometimes if you're leading from an organization that you're not super familiar with, when you make those type of assessments, you'll find out really quickly what the sacred cows are that everybody gets upset about. And it may not even be that they're upset about it. It just could be that the guy before you said the same things, but he had an ulterior motive behind it. And so all of these are important of just being able to truthfully assess with your team what the accurate situation is so you can move forward.
Yeah. No, and that's good, because I heard somebody, when I was at a conference, I don't remember what exactly it was, but they were talking about when you met with somebody who wants to put an idea out there, and the whole, that didn't work last time we did it. Yeah. And so what they were saying is they had done, instead of trying to kill that young person's, because they're like, it's usually somebody who's young and ambitious and whatever, instead of saying, yeah, that didn't work last time, but go, this is why it didn't work last time.
Yeah.
Because it could have been that when you were trying to implement it last time, 10, 15 years ago, you didn't have the technology to help make it happen.
That's right. And you know what? A lot of people change over the course of 10 or 15 years. So, that's a great word. The second book that I was going to mention is the Measure What Matters book by John Doerr. In the book, he essentially argues for OKRs OKRs mean objective and key results. So, all right, once you've assessed where the issue is and you've got the right people on the bus, what Door argues is, okay, we're setting the objective. Now, key results are actually measurable data that we can use to move from this point to this point. So again, you can get the right assessment of where an organization is. You can get the right people on the bus. Collins talks about some in his book, but Door actually builds and kind of fleshes out, okay, here's how you take that data and you move step by step to where you want to go. Sometimes there are organizations make objectives. I'm going to use one from the church world because this is one I talk to students about often. They'll just be like, okay, what's an objective for a church? Okay, we want to see 25 people come to know Jesus over this next year. Listen, that is a great idea. But at the end of the day, when we think about salvation from a Christian standpoint, we're acknowledging that there's a God who made us, that we as humanity are broken, that Christ came, lived the life that we couldn't live. He died on the cross, and that we can be saved by placing our faith in Christ and turning from our sins. But can I actually make you do that?
No.
No, I can't. And if I do, it's probably not the right motivation. So is that objective actually a good objective? Because it's not something that I can actually determine the outcome of. So maybe a better objective is I want to have at least 100 gospel conversations over the next year. Now, can I determine whether I actually have those gospel conversations? Yes, I can. So that's an objective that's actually measurable, and I can see if I do this, then the key result should be something along the lines of, people making decisions for Christ. But again, the objective ultimately is something that I can determine. And so often when we try to lead, we set these goals, but they're actually not things that we can actually determine.
Right. No, and that's a good one, because I know with Faith Racers, that one of our goals is, granted, we're doing motocross ministry, so it's not a whole lot of, I just call it seed throwing. We're just going out and we're throwing seeds a whole lot. And I love that that's our objective, because it even helps as I moved into my more day-to-day routine in life, that just being able to quickly bring up conversations about the gospel and salvation. So I'm glad you'd mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the two big books. Obviously you can see I've got a stack of books behind me. I've got stacks of books in front of me. I've got stacks of books. I will say this, be a consumer of information, not just those that you're going to agree with. Read those even that you're going to disagree with. And don't just read it so that you can argue in your mind, but truly consider the ideas.
I was about to ask why, so I'm glad you said it.
Yeah. Consider the ideas of the people that you disagree with, because even if you still come on the other side just fundamentally disagreeing with them, often there are evidence of why they're holding the beliefs that they hold. And so while they're coming to conclusions that you differ with, sometimes they see evidence that maybe you've overlooked that can be helpful in leadership. Maybe they see people differently than you see people. And you know what? You're still like, I fundamentally disagree with you, but I can appreciate the next time that I'm in an organization and I've got an employee or a coworker who's coming from this position. You know what? Instead of being combative or argumentative, I actually know where they're coming from. And so while I may disagree fundamentally about the conclusions of what needs to be done, do I agree that that's a problem? Yeah. Whatever that is. There are a litany of political issues that are hot and button issues, and I know I'm not getting into those, and I know you don't necessarily want to either. But what I'll say is, on most political issues that are hot button issues, there is a common ground, if we'll stop and think about it, that this is an issue. I just think it should be solved this way, and you think it should be solved this way, but we both can agree this is an issue. So sometimes that common ground is the best and really the firmest ground that you can get when you're trying to lead in an organization. And when people see that you actually care enough to understand the positions that they're coming from, it really does help you lead.
Yeah. And I say that all, I love the Zig Ziglar quote. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's
Love it.
exactly right.
And
Yeah.
so the second question I always ask people on that, leaders or readers, that what are you currently reading, or maybe have just finished reading?
Yeah. One of the books I'm reading right now is called The Anxious Generation. And I can't for the life of me recall what the name of the guy is who wrote the book. Have you read that book yet, or are you familiar with it?
No, I'm writing it down because I'd forgot to ask you so I could put it up on the screen.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So the impetus of the book, and again, I can't recall the guy who's writing the book, but he is a social psychologist. He's actually an atheist. So I'm going to put into practice what I just said. And what he's doing is he's making observations from statistics and data about the role of social media and technology and the way that it is impacting the current generation. And I mean, when you look at the way that social media, when you look proportionately as social media usage rises from children, kids, young adults, from youth up to 18 years old, proportionally, the more time they spend on that, the more it's creating levels of anxiety and depression and self-worth issues. Um, and so the impetus of the book is reflecting on that and then proposing, here are some things that we need to think of as we move forward in this world. And so,
Is it this one?
yeah, that's it. But yep, that's the one. And so it really is a good book, and especially if you are a guy our age or older, it is a good book to help understand what's going on in the generations that are younger than us. And if you're part of the generation that's younger than us, it will help you better understand what's going on in your world. I mean, you think about, all right, I'm going
It
to get
almost
into,
reminds me of, have you watched the Netflix where it talks about, I think it's The Social Dilemma? That's almost what it sounds like.
okay, I haven't seen the film on Netflix. So,
I think it was on Netflix, but because I were talking how anxiety and everything tacked social
yeah,
media and blah, all that good stuff. I was
it
like,
could, and when you think about it from a development standpoint, and again, this is getting way off topic, but essentially what's happening from the time someone is born until they're 25 years old, your brain is still in the process of formation. Yes, our brains still form as we get older, but really the frontal cortex of your brain is in the process of developing. Well, when you're trained to external stimuli and instant gratification that social media and modern technology give, it actually rewires the frontal cortex of your brain. In case you didn't know, the frontal cortex of your brain is what impacts your decision making. It's that filter. So you may have been around older people who, as they age, they just start being very blunt. Well, the issue is that as you age, your frontal cortex actually begins to shrink in size um, and within function. And so what they're finding out is that the more a child uses smartphones, video games, social media, it's actually impacting the decision making, empathy, filter of young adults. And so it's creating anxiety, depression. Anyway, that's the book that I'm currently reading.
no, that's awesome. That's a lot of good stuff to chew on and think about.
Yeah.
And so, uh, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how
Yeah.
do they reach out and get in touch with you if they have questions, maybe even want to get in school, anything like that?
Yeah, the easiest route would be to go to my faculty webpage. And so if you go to nobts.edu, you can see /faculty /parts of my name. It's there on the screen. You can find my faculty webpage. It's got an email for me. I think my office number is also on that webpage, but just reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to correspond any way that I can. If you're curious about school and what that could look like, I'm more than happy to get you connected to the people who can help answer those questions if I can.
Awesome. That, well, Andrew, I appreciate you getting on here. I appreciate your friendship, sharing everything that you've shared with us. They will definitely have to do this again.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun. Hey, thanks for having me. And for those who've watched, I really appreciate your time this evening. And really, I think you're going to be encouraged and blessed by continuing to tune in. So Thanks for watching, and Aaron, thanks for having me this evening.
It was my pleasure. Man, what an awesome episode. Wasn't Andrew great? I hope you enjoyed it. He was phenomenal. I know there were a ton of things that I took away. I got a lot of notes that I got from listening and talking with him, going through our conversation on leadership, that personal growth and development. But here were a few key takeaways that I observed. And so one that, Andrew talked a lot about that it requires humility and a willingness to listen. I thought that was a huge point to hit on and talk about, because he was often talking about you don't have to be the smartest person in the room in order to lead effectively and be a great leader. The next thing we heard a lot about is they talking about learning from failure and how that's an essential part of growth. For you on your leadership journey, you've got to be willing to take risks. You've got to be willing to fail. And I think it's important as well to say that you only fail when you don't learn from it. He said the number one resource for you as a leader is your people. It's so important. And he talks about this, and our next point was the effectiveness of leaders, they being able to work themselves out of a job by equipping other people. You've got to build into your people. Now, that doesn't mean, as it says right at our next point, that you can just pass all responsibility. No, the buck stops with you. It's so important that we share that success with our people, empowering them to go do those other great things, but that we take ultimate responsibility for what happens. And you've got to be able to provide opportunities for your team to lead. And then, in order for your organization to grow, then you have to be able to acknowledge where you are in order to go get where you want to be. That's so crucial for us as leaders to understand where we are now and what do we have to do to get where we want to be. And I talk about that, I can't remember, in like episode 28, we talk about making growth your goal. So go back and listen to that one if you really want to know, because we talk about reverse engineering as well. And guys, if you're looking for that leadership or personal growth training, that could be for you, it could be for your team, could be at an event. Look, reach out to me. All of my contact information, it's listed below. I've got it up on the screen. Hit me up on social media. Hit me up on the website. That I'll be getting back to you within 24 to 48 hours. So really make sure, like and follow the show. That way we can make sure to continue to bring you great content. And so remember, you don't need to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. So keep leading, keep growing, and keep innovating. Until next time, stay inspired and connected, and I will see you on the next episode of the Clark Connection Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Clark Connection Podcast, where my goal is to add value to you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the show. You can also connect with me via my website, coachaclark.com, or on all socials at coach_A_Clark. The links are in the description. Huge thanks to my sponsors, Wayne with 7K Metals, Bobbie with the Comfy Quest LLC, Andrew with Automate Integrate Professional Services, Joseph with Landscape King, and Chris and Jess with CNJ Embroidery. We look forward to bringing you more great content. See you next week.